Driving test examiners of Reddit. What are the most ridiculous ways in which people have failed their driving test? A co-worker of mine was an examiner, actually at the place I did my driving test. He told me about someone who went out on a test and had an accident that nearly killed them both at the first right turn after starting the test. There was a concrete light post on the opposite side of the road, and the car got slammed into it by an oncoming truck. The kid, obviously, failed, but the examiner was never really okay again, as they took the brunt of the impact with a pole. Another person at the same spot was killed, in almost the exact same way, only minutes after passing her test. By the time I went through there to do my driving test, they had changed the route, so you would not turn right at that intersection. The last driving test I did, moving up license classes to drive trucks, was 8 hours long. I'm going to be moving up classes again shortly, to bigger trucks, so it will be interesting to see how the process has changed. My dad is a driving instructor. One time a candidate showed up drunk. A candidate didn't know how to unlock the steering wheel. A candidate didn't buckle up. GG after 2 meters. The most controversial. A candidate failed the test because the examiner told her that she drove with the long beam headlights on for the whole time. Turns out that the car she was driving at the time didn't even have the long beamers working. Oh man, I realized that I had my high beams on halfway through my test. The examiner never said anything about it though. Witnessed one test end very quickly after the examiner realized that either the vehicle brought in for the test had no working turn signals, or at least the driver didn't know how to use them. Either situation is considered an automatic fail. My mom immigrated from England. Dad taught her to drive, and dad is anything but a defensive driver. Dad had lots of tickets for speeding, erratic driving, etc. So mom got an automatic fail because she did not check her blind spot. She further failed because she did not even know what a blind spot was. Dad said later he never checked his blind spot, therefore did not think to teach it. This is why it's so important to have at least a few hours of professional driving instruction. I failed my driving test the first time because when I was preparing to reverse, I put the car into reverse before I turned around to physically look, even though the car never moved and my foot never left the brake. Frick that guy. I feel you. I had a friend get failed because he turned on the engine, didn't move the car, before the instructor had his seatbelt on. Not an instructor, but in my driver's ed class I witnessed a kid driving down the wrong side of the road pushing an orange cone in front of him. He didn't pass. Some say he's still pushing the orange cone to this very day. Obligatory, not me, but my friend. Our state had a law that stated that if you were in a crash, whether you were or were not at fault, you automatically failed. He had a branch fall off of a tree onto the top of the car while they were stopped at a light. It cracked the windshield, making it undrivable. Therefore he failed his first attempt. Second attempt, mandatory 30 days later. The testing facility was in a strip mall where the parking spots were on slight inclines down to the road. He passed his test and was waiting for a parking spot in front of the testing facility. Someone else failed to put their parking brake on, and their car rolled down and hit my friend's car. Automatic fail. Attempt 3 again, mandatory 30 days later. He finally passed. What an unbelievably stupid law. Driving instructor told me about someone who passed the driving test, but opened the car door as someone else was driving by. The car was damaged and his pass was revoked. My sister-in-law aced the entire driving test, then she drove back to the DMV, pulled into the parking lot, parked in the designated spot, and the front wheels bumped the curb. Fail. What the frick, lol. I'm not an instructor, but my brother failed his road test in my car. He had borrowed my mom's car to do the test, but it was too long, Lincoln Town Car, to parallel park. I didn't want to loan him my book Regal, but my mom talked me into it. 20 minutes after the test was supposed to start, he called me and said that he had crashed making the turn out of the driving school's parking lot. Apparently he got anxious waiting for an opportunity to pull into traffic and ran into some guy's pickup. Later, when I went to the body shop to pick my car up after being fixed, I found the busted headlight laying near the door. I took it home and wrapped it up for my brother for Christmas. Failed my first test because they didn't feel safe getting in my brand new car since it didn't have the proper inspection, since it was new and didn't need the mandated required inspection, and he didn't feel safe in it. Later saw him getting in a car that was missing all of its door handles. I failed mine because when I pulled up to a four-way stop there was another car on the right already stopped. After waiting for him to go for like a minute or two he finally noticed I was there. He was bent over the passenger seat doing something. He waved me through and went back to doing what Jay was doing. I looked both ways and went auto fail because he had the right of way and I could have caused an accident. I guess I was supposed to sit there forever. Good thing his car wasn't broken down or it'd still be sitting there. I hate it when someone blatantly has the right of way but just sits there, so you're left with the decision to just go and possibly get hit if they weren't paying attention, or wait it out and someone waves the other through. You get there first, you go. This kid was doing fine until the end of the exam when he had pulled into the DMV parking lot, park, and be told he passed. At this moment, the DMV system crashed, causing angry drivers to stream through the parking lot. So this kid pulls into the parking lot, gets stuck in the middle of cars passing on either side like a rock in a stream of cars and fails. I was that kid. Not an examiner, but I failed my test my first attempt because I ran a stop sign. A stop sign that had been blown away in the wind long ago, and was no longer there. All that was left was a solid white line on the ground, which was basically impossible to see in time. In New Zealand, a solid white like just means give way, and a solid yellow line means stop. Makes more sense that way. I always feel bad when I fail people on the course where they do parallel parking, etc. before even going on the road. It's maybe happened twice since I started this job a few months ago, but some of these kids either didn't have near enough instruction before taking the exam or unfortunately let their nerves get the best of them. One girl backed into the curb so fast, not once, but twice, on the parking exercises that I hit my head on the roof of the car. It's so hard to be calm after really bad mistakes like that, lol. Don't feel bad, feel good. The last thing we need is more people blocking traffic while they frick up a parking job. Also, these kids obviously need more practice, so I'll say you are saving lives here. During my test a jaywalker jumped in front of the car. I slammed the brakes. The guy apologized and waved me on. I went. My instructor yelled at me to stop, engaged in an awkwardly long waving battle with the jaywalker until they relented and crossed the street in front of me, and then I continued on. It was an automatic failure because I failed to yield right of way to the pedestrian. PSHHHHHH. I'm not a test examiner of course, but still, ridiculous. When I was taking my test, the examiner got mad at me for stopping to let someone finish crossing the street. Go figure. At least she didn't fail me though. I automatically failed my driving test for driving 37 mph in a 35 mph zone. The examiner also said my parallel parking was too close to the curb even though it wasn't touching. He also said my right turns were too tight despite the fact that I never hit the curb there either. Sorry for driving a 15-foot minivan and not wanting to swing out in traffic. I called bulls on the last two. There's no such thing as parallel parking too close to the curb. As close as possible equals being awesome at parallel parking. Not an examiner, but I failed mine because the light on the opposite end of the crossroads went red as I was crossing, and in a panic I stopped for it, just like Rain Man and the Don't Walk sign. There but for the grace of God go I. When I was getting my license there was a girl who was leaving because she failed. The examiner said to her co-worker I said at the stoplight to turn right. In the mandatory class I took I was told that some would fail you if you turned right on a red. She turned left on a red light. Not only illegal but the wrong direction I said. Go to say that is freaking ridiculous. My boyfriend failed his first test because he was technically speeding in the DMV parking lot. The limit was 5 miles per hour and he was going like 7 or 10. Everything else was perfect. Many of the places here have a stop sign within the boundary of the car park, so you have to stop before crossing the footpath. Many people don't realize, and therefore fail their test before it's even begun. But of course they still have to do the full test anyway, completely unaware that they already failed. I had a kid in my driver's ed class who failed his test because he saw a pumpkin on the other side of road, swerved across the lanes, hit it, came back to the other lanes, and then he looked at the instructor and said nailed it. That dude must have been a savage. My brother was doing his test and was nearly done. The last part of the test was parallel parking. He swung the back of the car in, then totally forgot to put it back into drive. So he looked forward, adjusted the wheels, and promptly smashed into the car behind him. That sucks, but that's also really funny. Not an examiner, but the person who took their test before me went through the whole exam very well. Almost parallel parked on the first try and got through the road test without a hitch. Then when he pulled into the parking spot to end the test, he hit the gas instead of the brake and ripped his front bumper off on the curb. I'd like to think that was enough to fail him. Friend failed immediately because as they started to leave parking lot, he accidentally was in reverse. Instructor just told him to loop back into parking lot. A 30-second fail, haha. Oh, I got a question for them too. Am I allowed to glance at my backup camera? It is a law now that every 2018 vehicle needs to have a backup camera. I was allowed to use it when I went for my license, but I was told not to rely on it. When in doubt, look out the back window when reversing. Funny story, I passed. However, my driving test was cut very short. Shortly after we were out driving, the examiner started giving me quick directions on the way back to the station and rushing me to get back. As in, after a second of stopping at a stop sign telling me to go, turn here, in a raised voice, even telling me I can go a little faster. As soon as we get back to the station, he quickly hands me the papers saying I passed, jumps out of the car and rushes over to his patrol car. I go inside to hand in the papers at the window. Nearly 5-10 minutes later, the examiner is back walking in through the doors with somebody in handcuffs. Turned out that while we were out for my driving test, he recognized someone that was a wanted felon. My mother didn't see me until he saw the examiner with the guy in handcuffs. She had thought and questioned if we brought this guy in handcuffs back in her car that I was using for the examen. My driving test didn't last probably but a little over 5 minutes. Didn't even do the parallel parking or highway merging part of the test. Yet, he still passed me anyways. All because he needed to rush back to the station to go arrest this guy he saw someplace during my examen. Most cops get a bonus for arresting someone wanted. Heard this one on a local radio a while ago, so don't know if it's true, but nonetheless, a woman was taking the motorcycle test. About 15 minutes in, her instructor, who was driving the car following her, rear ends her at a crosswalk. Nothing serious luckily, she just tips over and manages to get back up. The examiner asks if she can continue driving and she responds yes. Failed because you shouldn't drive away from an accident. Apparently her instructor paid for the second try. Failed my test because I leaned to one side and lifted one bum cheek up to let one rip. I told the examiner he might want to open a window. You deserve the failure if that's what you did. Instead of a car, they came on a horse, and instead of driving it, they offered it to me in exchange for a driver's license. When I took my driving classes, I asked my to-be examiner some of the things that resulted in an automatic fail. Of course, she listed the obvious reasons like running stop signs, lights, crashing, etc. But the one that stood out the most was eluding the police. She then proceeded to explain to me that that is in the rules because it actually happened once. I borrowed a co-worker's motorcycle for my bike test since my signal light was broken. I was used to driving my really heavy bike and let the clutch out a little too quick on the borrowed street legal dirt bike. Catwalked through an intersection. Yeah, you always gotta test that friction zone on a bike you're not used to. Not an examiner, but I failed my first driving test because instead releasing the parking brake, I accidentally popped the hood. The levers are right next to each other, and even though I knew exactly which one to reach for, and what they did, I was nervous. I probably should have failed my drive test. There's this weirdly angled intersection in my neighborhood, so of course it is included in the drive test. I have never used this intersection going north-south, only east-west, which is a fairly normal looking intersection. Well, he told me to take a left at it heading north and I couldn't figure it out and ended up realizing halfway through I was not taking a left. I'm doing this wrong, aren't I? Homie still passed me cause I was cute and nerdy and we talked about Wonder Woman and I was very cautious and safe in the weird intersection. 1. Be attractive. 2. Don't be unattractive. It's not a driving test, but I knew a guy who went for his first drive after getting his permit. His mom was the passenger. He was approaching the stop sign and hit the gas instead of the brake, driving in front of an 18-wheeler. Fortunately, they both lived with minimal damage. My brother did this to me once and go-karts chipped my front tooth on the steering wheel. Here's one from a friend of mine. We knew a friend of ours was taking his exam, so we drove out to the route just to give him some moral support. We waved at him when overtaking us, and he flipped us the bird. The examiner failed him for not having basic courtesy to other road users. My mom failed her first driving test because her inspection sticker was too faded and unreadable. It wasn't. She just had a nasty tester who never passed teens on their first try just as a power trip. Not speaking English. Going 10 miles per hour over the speed limit the entire time. Cutting people off. Mistaking the gas for the brake. Crashing into the DMV building. Crashing into the car behind next to them. Running stop signs. Missing turns. Stopping at the stop ahead sign. Driving in the oncoming lane. Calling the examiner a fat bee and telling her to get the frick out of his car. Having a seizure, just to name a few. Is that one person or many? Because it reads like a sketch show. I failed my first test because I slowed down too much while approaching a green turn arrow. It had just turned green when I approached it. There were no cars behind me, and I didn't even come to a complete stop. I was a bit faster than a rolling stop, so I felt like that was pretty ridiculous. In high school, my driver's ed partner was a complete moron. Not only did the instructor's passenger side brake save our lives at least once, but this kid when told to park the car he stopped it with the brake. Then he just sort of got out. Car was running and in drive and it started rolling away. That mother is probably on the road today. Not for long. Give him 5 minutes in the grocery store and he won't have a ride anymore. I failed my driver's test by putting the car in the ditch. Minnesota in February, and I was scheduled to take my test in the afternoon. It had drizzled that morning and then snowed, so the road was ice covered with 3 inches of snow. My dad asked if I still wanted to take the test, and I said that I had to learn how to drive in this at some point. Got through most of the test okay, not great. I was asked to take a left, hit an icy patch, and slid into the ditch. It was only about a foot lower than the road, so not too serious. I tried, but couldn't get the car to move as it was too icy. It was only a couple of blocks to the testing center, so me and the examiner walked back. A guy with a 4-wheel drive truck offered to pull the car out, and Dad drove us home. Not an examiner, but after I passed my test I learned that someone else who was supposed to take their test at the same time had technically failed it due to losing the keys to their car before they even started the test. It was a shame really, as they looked really confident going into the test. When I took mine, the girl before me auto failed because her car battery was dead. When I got back, the tow truck was just finishing lifting it to take it away. What a bad day. First time I did my driving test, I was on a hill, forgot to put the brake and the car started rolling back a bit. I knew at that point my chances of passing were over. One of many reasons I failed that first test, and the tester enjoyed letting me know every single one of them. 10 years later I still hate that guy. I would fail you right now for calling it a brake. Not an examiner, but this was one of my road tests. I made a mistake and knew that I blew it. I started tapping on the steering wheel. The examiner asked why and I said I was frustrated. I guess I removed hands from steering wheel and then got docked more points for road rage. I ended up just shy of being so bad that I would need to take driver training again. Afterward I found out that I was actually alright when I thought I blew it, and my unnecessary road rage was what made me fail. That's when the actual rage began. Not exactly ridiculous, but I remember on my second driving test, about 0.5 seconds into the test, I ran a stop sign in the parking lot of the licensing office and was promptly informed that I failed. At least he let me do the rest of the test to practice. This makes me glad to have tested in Idaho. Heck, We didn't even parallel park on the test. Only thing he marked me down on was securing the vehicle because I flat out told him I'm not putting the parking brake on. With an automatic parked on a completely level street, it's pointless, and half of the year it'll just freeze that way. He laughed, said he agreed but he'd have to mark me down if I didn't, and I just said yeah, I know. He was a cool guy. Opposite end. I passed my test because my instructor was super racist. He never actually said it but kept saying a certain race does this and that. Then an Asian woman jaywalked in front of us and he said that's the people I'm talking about. Anyways, he kept going on a racist rant the whole test after that and failed to see me speed in a school zone and run a stop sign. Either that or he did see it and just passed me for being white. See, racism isn't always bad. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.